have, and they have a wonderful program coming up soon, so I thought we'd all like to hear about it. So come on up.
There's 2 mics.
Or they can share.
Thank you, Mary,
Well,
Council, for
Thank you.
inviting us and being willing to put up with us for a while. We'll try not to act too much like old folks.
That's kind of hard.
You're going to demonstrate some of
I
the.
don't think so.
oh, gee.
But we are old folks, if you want to look at it that way. That's what the Geritol Frolics is all about, really. A little bit of history. I would hope that most of you know them, although, we always get new people coming around. But Bob Dryden, who was the theater chair at what was then called Brainerd Community College back in 1987, created the Geritol Frolics in an effort to get more senior citizen involvement in community theater. And he got such a large turnout and such a wealth of talent that the thing became an entity in and of itself. And in 1988, it had attracted so much attention, was so successful that it was invited to perform at the National Council on Aging's Association convention in Washington, D.C. And they did, and it was extremely successful. And then it continued on through the year 2001. Bob retired in, I want to say 94, 95, somewhere in there, and Dennis Lamberson took over as chair, and he kept it going until the end of...
Speak to the mic there a little more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Until the end of the 2001 season. And then they decided, for a number of reasons, I'm given to understand there were administrative changes. There was a change in the direction of student curriculum and that sort of thing. And they decided to discontinue the production of the Geritol Frolics. By that time, Yvonne and I had been performers. I, by the way, was with the show from 1987. I was a techie. I was too young to be a performer. The minimum age is 55. And in 2001, by then, we had been performing for about 5 years. Yvonne joined a year before I did.
I'm older than he is.
I wasn't going to say that. But I was working. I was employed then at Potlatch, and I was working shift work and that sort of thing. So it was pretty difficult for me to do things that I would like to have done in that respect. But we did join, and in 2001, as I said, the production was discontinued. And a number of us who were former cast members had become friends. We had our social circle, whatever you want to call it, and we were at our home one day and talking about this kind of thing, and somebody said, wouldn't it be great if we had the Geritol Frolics? Well, when you say something like that in a circle, a bunch of performers, all of a sudden the imagination gets active and whatever. But it did, and we started talking about it, and we said, well, first of all, we need a place to perform, and who would be the director? And of course, because of my experience in theater from dating back to 1972, I guess I got tagged as the director if we were going to do anything. Well, it so happens Yvonne and I were also investigating in Crosby, a fellow that was a English teacher and drama coach over there, had been involved with their theater program. I forget what they was called now, Cuyuna Range, something like that. But at any rate, they were thinking about trying to put that back together, and so we went over to see what was going on. Crosby, by the way, is my hometown, and so I knew those folks. But while we were there, we met Julie Despot, who was the community education director over there, and I learned about community education. So when we came back to Brainerd, we were talking about it, and Paul Bloom's name came up, and he was director of Brainerd Community Education, and I went to talk to him. Coincidentally, the school district had decided to discontinue using the Franklin Junior High School as a educational facility, and it was sitting there wide open and empty. And the Crossing Arts Alliance folks, who were kind of new at that time as well, decided that maybe they could get in there and create an arts center. So they had done some inroads there and whatever. So when I went to talk to Paul Bloom and told him that there was an interest in putting the Geritol Frolics back together, and what did he think? He kind of went, because they had the auditorium, the stage, all that stuff was just sitting there not being used. So we started talking about it, and we found out, we made some phone calls, and we found out that there were a number of people who would be willing to join us in that venture, and particularly some folks who had been with Bob Dryden back in 1987, who had discontinued their involvement with the show a number of years before, but they were willing to come back and help us. I talked to Paul Bloom about how we would get started, because obviously we needed financing. And he said, figure out a budget. What do you need to operate? So we did, between Yvonne and I think, as I recall, we came up with something greater than a little over $8,000. And then
That was a joke, by the way.
we went to talk to Paul, and he said, well, you need this, and you need that, and you need more here, there, and bottom line, he said, well, I think we can probably do this for $11,400. Okay, where are we going to get the money? He said, well, we can finance that. Okay. So we started putting things together, and we searched high and low, and we finally came up with a person who could be our orchestra director. And Yvonne started designing costumes, and we hired a choreographer, and we ordered music, and we started putting things together. And in 2004, before the first curtain opened, we spent $24,000. And but at the end of the season, we paid back the $11,400 to community education, paid all other incidental operating expenses, and put $7,000 in the bank. And we have never looked back. So we are now in our 11th year. And we have had very successful runs. Last year we have 482-seat auditorium. We sold out 6 of 8 performances last year and just barely missed on the other 2. We bring in people from all over the state, and they come by the busloads. And I'm going to let Yvonne tell you about that in a minute. But we do. They come by the busloads. And they have been coming, and the word is out. We are extremely successful. The whole idea, as far as I'm concerned, is to give senior citizens an opportunity to do something that they may have wished to do for a good share of their lives, but didn't because they were raising families, serving in the military, having a career, doing all those things that all of us have done. And now they have the empty nest, and the careers are over and whatever, but they still have the itch. I like to call it the itch. And I like to also say that we provide them a way to scratch that itch. And we have been doing it for these past 10 years, and this is our 11th. We picked up some new people on auditions this year, and we're just going to keep on going. The other thing that we've had to do this year is we discontinued our association with the community education folks. We kind of, I'm not exactly sure what's going on with the business district or business office and all that sort of thing, but we kind of got a feeling that maybe they were sweeping things out a little bit. I don't know. We don't know. But it just seemed like the better thing for us to do is maybe to go out to incorporate, which we did. And we are now a standalone entity. We do consider ourselves to be a nonprofit organization. We are currently filing for 501c3. We have a board of directors and bylaws and the whole 9 yards. And we were just intend to continue doing what we've been doing and providing good entertainment. We're a family show. We do dance, song, and comedy. It's like I said, it's a family show. It's clean. We oftentimes get kids coming to see what Grandma and Grandpa are doing up there on the stage, and the word is out on us. We're very actually.
That's my story.
Yes.
Don't want to cut you short, but we got a minute and a half left.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry. So then, here we go.
Okay, very quickly, I just want you to know that we right now have 28 tour groups scheduled to come to this show. I have looked at the data, and it looks like about 1/4 of our attendance is Brainerd Baxter, 1/4 comes on tour buses, and the other half comes from all over the United States, mostly from Minnesota. We've also had people from foreign countries, including Africa, at our show. Today, I had a phone call from one of the tour groups in Coon Rapids. They come every single year. She started advertising several months ago. Today was the day that they could purchase tickets, and that started at 9 o'clock this morning. She got to work at 7:30. She went to open the front door, and there were two little ladies sitting in lawn chairs in front of the door, wrapped in blankets, waiting for the doors to open so that they could buy their tickets. And she said, we're the hot ticket item down there, even over the Gatlin brothers. So we thought that was pretty good. So, and he mentioned our budget. This year, our budget is $65,000. So that's one of the reasons we had to raise ticket prices. Things have gone up.
We get people coming in, as I said, obviously, from what Yvonne just said, and they spend money here in this city. They eat here, they stay in the area. We humbly say that it's a modest contribution to the revenue, but it is a contribution. And we keep them coming in, and hopefully there are going to be some ways somehow that we can promote that and maybe build on it a little bit. So that's pretty much where we are. We're just having fun, you know. It's a good show. If you haven't seen it, I really encourage you to come see it. If you know anybody that has seen it, talk to them. I think you'll be convinced that it's probably a good experience.
And Saturday night's a good time to come. We've got seats available then.
It's absolutely wonderful,
Thank
but
you.
I wish you had more performances.
Well, I'm not so sure I do.
It's just, it's just
But you never know.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Do you
having
have
me.
any
Thank
questions?
you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay,
We might have to think of going back to the 7:30 time, because the committees get so rushed and then the guests don't always get there. Give us some.
welcome to tonight's city council meeting. I hope you all had a nice weekend. For a lot of people, it was a long weekend, and the weather somewhat was nice most of the weekend. So anyway, want to welcome you. One thing I want to mention, something that we're going to try, is that we have over on that podium and at the corner of the table over there, we have these sheets that we'd like you to fill out if you are going to plan on participating in the open forum, to ask the question and give us a little more of a heads up if somebody's going to participate with that. And we also would like to know who it is that comes to our meetings. So we have this sign-up sheet. It's not mandatory, but we're going to strongly encourage people to sign in so we know who is here and kind of what topics that they need more information on or want us to contact them and so forth. So something that we are starting new. This came from Council Member Matten, who stole it from Baxter. Apparently that's something that they do. So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. But anyway, it's something we're going to try. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But
So, Mr. Chair, where is that available? Is that at the door?
there's a sign
So
over
that's
there
on the
and
podium
one over
also,
there.
okay.
Yeah.
And over by Jesse.
And we don't have email available for the people in the audience, so you'd have to come in to sign and get your chance to fill these out. Okay, with that being said, let's do roll call.
Mayor Wallin.
Here.
Mary Cope.
Here.
Pritchett.
Here.
Batten. Evans.
Here.
Sheeler.
Here.
Orkenhagen.
Here.
Here. Can you please join us with the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the agenda, is there any changes? Oh,
Yes, in the minutes, just for one, on page 5, my name was spelled wrong. I just caught it here tonight, I'm sorry about that. And also...
that's under the consent calendar,
Oh,
correct?
okay, I'll wait for that.
Okay. Does anybody have anything to add to the agenda? Is
Move to approve the agenda.
there a second?
Second.
Other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, consent calendar.
Yes, and in the minutes, on page 5, my name was spelled wrong. And then on page 4, the explanation about the motion and second on the Oakland Township Board meeting. It says here, with the note changed, and all there is like a line through choose. And I wonder if it should say strike choose, and they, down the road, if somebody just seen a line through it, they're going to say, well, it basically doesn't mean much with a line through it. It doesn't clarify that choose should be struck. And it should probably say in the minutes that, we're going to strike, choose, and go with force. And especially when the dollar amount that we're talking about in that wording. I would make a motion to amend it to that.
Is there any other discussion or anything
Can I
else?
have him clarify his motion?
The motion would be to use the word strike, choose, instead of just putting a line through it.
Thank you.
I had also a request, if we could remove from the consent calendar item E and perhaps put it down under 8 as C perhaps, or wherever you think is appropriate, Mr. Chair.
That's a motion?
Do
Yeah,
we need
and-
to make motions on that?
No.
Okay.
I'll second. No motion, okay. Are
So,
you just going to go
I'm
with it?
gonna- C looks like a good spot. to put it.
Whatever you think on.
Okay. Anybody else?
With those changes, I would move the consent calendar as amended.
Second. All right.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, roll call.
Cope.
Yes.
Pritchett.
Yes.
Batten.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Sheeler.
Yes.
Orkenhagen.
Yes.
Parks.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Bevins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to approve the bills as presented.
Second.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Cope.
Yes.
Pritchett.
Yes.
Batten.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Sheeler.
Yes.
Orkenhagen.
Yep.
Parks.
Yes. Okay, tonight in the audience, we have Ms. Jennifer Bergman, who's the Executive Director of the HRA, and she's here to give us a little update about where the HRA has been in the past year.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Mr. President, members of the council, as Mr. Parks mentioned, I'm Jennifer Bergman. I'm the Executive Director of the Brainerd HRA, and thank you for letting me come here this evening. I'll try to be brief. I'm going to give you an update. Please feel free to ask me questions if you have any. The HRA's had a busy year so far. I'm trying to get here quarterly. That is kind of my mission, to get here every quarter to give you an update. So I'll just breeze through. You do have a report in your council packet, but I'll just kind of summarize as I go through. The HRA did have a strategic planning session in February, and they adopted their goals in March of 2014. Because of the depth of our goals, we really decided that these were 2-year goals, and since they were adopted in March, we decided to extend it until the end of 2015. an overview or the three goals that the HRA have are: one, to continue the redevelopment of commercial, rental, and owner-occupied properties in the city of Brainerd; two, to continue providing high-quality, safe, and affordable housing for existing and potential residents and participants; and then three, to communicate effectively with our partners and the public to enhance collaboration. In the goals that you have in your packet, there are objectives that are listed. I'm not going to go through those, but we do have a number of objectives under each one of those goals. Housing and commercial rehab. As you know, the City of Brainerd and the Brainerd HRA embarked on a grant application to deed the Department of Employment and Economic Development for a Small Cities Development Program grant to do a commercial and housing rehab program in southeast Brainerd. Deed really asks applicants to target neighborhoods so that we have a small, concise area in which their funds can be used. So we identified, in conjunction with the Healthy Community Partnership Housing Task Force, the areas between 11th and 18th and Pine and Laurel. So that's where this money has been focused. To date, we've processed 21 housing rehab applications, and 11 of those have been completed. And in your packet, I also provided you some before and afters on a couple of the houses that we've rehabbed with those funds. In addition, we have processed 6 commercial applications. Those are on Oak Street, and then also, and 3 have been completed. And also in your packet is Wide's Appliance that shows you a before and after on that. I know the laundromat's getting ready to start, and Lakes Printing is out getting bids. So we're excited about both the housing and the commercial component. The downtown motel. As you know, the owner of the downtown motel had provided a letter to the city to purchase the downtown motel from the owner. Personnel and Finance Committee at the City of Brainerd referred that over to the HRA, spent a couple of months researching, trying to find out if there was a reuse for that property. The problem with that property really is the size. That parcel is squeezed between 2 buildings, and it's a very small lot. It's actually 2 parcels and very small and squeezed between 2 buildings. Negotiated to a point where the demolition or the acquisition and demolition of that property would have been about $100,000. The problem was there really wasn't a potential reuse at that time. So as I was meeting with developers trying to see if there was any way I could get a developer in to do something with that property, maybe it was assembling additional properties, I really wasn't getting a lot of people kind of jumping on board. Personnel and Finance and the HRA really believed that $100,000 was just too large of an investment, with only blight removal being the goal. So at this time we passed. We did cancel our purchase agreement on that property. I continue to kind of keep my eye on it. I talk to the property owner probably once a month, just kind of seeing where he's at, and you never know, we'll just continue to watch that property. Our scattered site replacement program. The Brainerd HRA, in partnership with the Healthy Community Partnership Housing Task Force, created a scattered site replacement program where we purchase homes that are beyond repair, demolish those homes, clear the lot, and then sell those lots to somebody who will build a new single-family home. I'm really proud to report that we have purchased 4 homes under that program: 509 E Street, 1321 Norwood, 614 Tamarack, and 1504 8th. Of those 4, all homes have been demolished. All 4 had very significant structural damage. And of those 4, 1 home has been constructed. We are working with the Lakes Area Habitat for Humanity, who is interested in 2 of the 3 lots for sure, and looking at construction on those properties, at least 1 in 2015. That program really was a success because of the number of partners, not only on the task force, but also our funding partners. We received a significant grant from the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, the Initiative Foundation, Crow Wing County HRA. A number of different partners kind of came together and helped fund that program. Our housing study. Actually, this is a Crow Wing County HRA project. The Crow Wing County HRA hired Maxfield to do a county-wide housing study. Our last study was done in 2007, and as you know, the housing market has changed drastically since 2007. A lot of the grant applications that we submit, a lot of developers who are coming into town are always asking for a current copy of a housing study, and so this was a way that we could do, kind of both things, use that for grant applications, and then also provide the information to developers or those who are interested in building housing in the city of Brainerd. This study looks at every community in Crow Wing County. It does include specifically the city of Brainerd. Here, I did provide a copy to Mark Osgarden and asked him to review it. I got that in August. We hope to have this draft finalized, at which point we will invite Maxfield up here to give a presentation on the final study, and then we will invite all council members and staff to this presentation. And then our federal programs. As you know, we administer 2 programs. We have public housing, and I'll talk about that first, and then we administer the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. Public housing, we have 203 units of public housing. Our residents pay 30% of their gross adjusted income towards rent, and HUD funds us in what they call operating subsidy for the balance of what a market rent would be and what the resident is paying. As you know, the federal government has seen significant cuts, and then in turn, we also do. In 2014, we received 89% of our operating subsidy, so eligible for 100%, and then we received 89% of that. I'm also very proud to report that the Brainerd HRA received the highest category for scoring that we can get from HUD, and that's called High Performer. We are based on a scale from 0 to 100, and we received a 94, which continues to provide us that High Performer status, which we're very proud of. We, in our public housing, we house approximately 292 people, and a lot of times I get asked the question, who lives in public housing? What are your residents? I just took a look at that for July. Of course, it's constantly changing. August. It's constantly changing. 17% of our residents are elderly, 56% are disabled, and a little over 38% of those residents that we have are employed. The average income of public housing resident is about $13,498. And then our last federal program is our Housing Choice Voucher, or our Section 8 program. Again, proud to report that the HRA in this program received a 100% score on our Section 8 Management Assistance Program, which is how we're scored by HUD. So we received 100% for our management of the Section 8 program. We have 320 vouchers on average. So that's 320 times 12 is what we're allowed. So that number fluctuates. Oftentimes, we don't hear from HUD about our funding. I know last year we didn't hear until July. So we're trying to manage a program with really not knowing what our funding is going to be. So sometimes we start out very conservative, and then towards the end we build it if we find out what our funding is. So right now we actually have 329 vouchers that are out there, again, because we started low at the beginning of the year. 225 of those 329 are here in Brainerd. We do serve all of Crow Wing County with our Section 8 program. Again, who has, and maybe I'll talk just a second about what the voucher is. A voucher gives somebody the ability to go out and rent in the private market. The landlord has to agree to accept the Section 8 voucher. An inspection must be conducted to make sure that that unit meets housing quality standards. And then the resident pays 30% of their gross adjusted income to the landlord for rent, and then the HRA makes up the difference. We receive funds from HUD for those programs in something called housing assistance payments, and so that is the money that we use to pay the difference in their rent. And again, who has a housing choice voucher? About 21% of our voucher holders are elderly, 45% of our voucher holders are disabled, and a little over 36% of our voucher holders are employed. Our average income for the Section 8 program is a little bit lower than public housing, and that's about $12,928. The HRA, because there's such a huge demand for this program, actually had our waiting list closed for about 2.5 years, and in May of this year we did open our Section 8 waiting list. It's already growing. After 3 full months, we've already received about 350 applications. So we will probably get that number to 500 to 600, and then we'll have to close it again. We just don't want to give people the false hope of getting a voucher when really 300 to 400, 500 people on a waiting list can be sometimes a long wait before they're eligible for that voucher. So the HRA continues to do things in Brainerd and hopefully help through our redevelopment and through our housing activities. We really appreciate the continued relationship that we have with the city of Brainerd. I do attend department head meetings and enjoy those monthly. It's always interesting to learn what other things are going on in the city of Brainerd. And we just hope that we can continue to partner in the future. So with that, I will stop talking and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have one question, and that was the applications. You said, if they're going to get to 500 to 600, but when you go through the applications, are you on the first come, first served basis, or are you picking through to see if they're eligible? How do you, you only got room for only X amount out of 600? How do you choose it?
We have a preference. We have a local preference. So those who live within Crow Wing County automatically go to the top. If people from outside of Crow Wing County, they'll fall below those residents of Crow Wing County, and then it's on a first come, first served basis.
If you were a private developer and you were interested in putting a single-family dwelling on one of these lots, how does that work?
We would love it.
Who actually owns the property?
The HRA own all 4 of the lots. And boy, if there are private developers who are out there interested in building a home on those lots, give the HRA a call. BrainerdHRA.org is our website, and I'd be happy to provide anybody information.
Under the public housing and Section 8, the third category is employed.
Mm-hmm.
What is, just briefly, basically, what are the parameters of that criteria?
As I mentioned, we do, their rent is based on 30% of their income. So what we do is we have to determine what their income is.
So
that employed can be 10 hours a week, it could be 40 hours a week, it could be, a number of different things. It's just that they have a job. There's a category in our reports that specifically tell me that.
I was curious, the elderly and disabled you identify in separate categories. Are some of the elderly disabled or some of the disabled elderly? And how do you then account for them?
That's a very good question, and I may have to follow up on that. Our elderly are 62 and older. Are disabled. There may be some overlap in that, and I will follow up and get that information. You're welcome.
Anybody here have any questions? Anybody have any questions?
What's the size of your budget in here? Approximately. It's got to be huge.
I'll tell you what, I actually brought it, thinking maybe that would be a question. Sometimes it's kind of hard because we have a general fund, we have a public housing budget, and we have a Section 8 budget, and we're about $3 million.
Okay.
Just ballparking about $3 million between the 3 programs.
Okay.
Our housing payments, just for the Section 8 program, are about $1.2 million annually. So about a third of our budget actually goes directly to landlords for paying the rent.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Before I go to the Personnel and Finance Committee, I do want to make mention of one thing that was in the consent calendar, and I want to highlight that there are 2 current terms for the EDA that's about to will expire on 9/7/2020. But we understand that at least one of the people that had been on there is not going to be reapplying. So we do have a need for up to 2 people for the EDA. We have one for the HRA, we have one for the Transportation Advisory Committee, and one for the Cable TV Advisory Committee. And the applications can either be gotten from City Hall, or you can go online and complete it. So with that being said, I go to Personnel and Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 1 has been dispensed with. Item number 2, the park office roof repair. There is a couple of proposals in our packet, as well as a recommendation from Mr. Cahy in the building department to accept the Herzog roofing quote. The motion is to accept the Herzog roofing quote for $20,845, providing Mr. Cahy can confirm that this will solve all the roofing problems, because there's some itemization and some roofing problems that aren't on the bids. And the money's to come from general unallocated, and I so move.
Any other discussion?
Does that include the insulation?
No, sir.
No insulation on this, so no figures on that yet?
It would be, no, we don't have, we've got no bids from any of our contractors, and that's the way we bid it, because of the money.
Okay.
If we don't, Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yeah.
If we don't take, the thought process is, if we don't take care of the roof problem, that building's a little bit of a hodgepodge as it is. If we don't take care of the roof problem now, there'll be nothing to worry about as far as the insulation. But we're hoping to be able to budget for that for 2015. The specific issue on the questions for Mr. Cahy are where the we have multiple buildings that are hooked together.
Yeah.
And where the two buildings come together, where the tile roof on one part and the metal roof on the other, and the metal roof has been the primary source of our problems. Where they come together, Alderman Matten brought up, that's a critical junction. And while it hasn't been the primary source of the leaks, it's certainly one that we want to take care of when we do the roof on the metal part. And so she brought up a great point that we just need to make sure that Mr. Cahy, that we take care of all the roofing problems with this bid. So the insulation, fortunately, can all be dealt with from the inside. So we'll probably be looking at some spray foam insulation, but we don't have any bids on that yet. As you know, the other thing is we've probably got about 26,000 unencumbered in our general unallocated, so this is going to take care of a chunk of it. So
Can I
that'll be
get-
after the water tower.
One more question, real specific, like if there's any electrical issues that's not in here, that's just strictly
This
roof.
is all going to be on top of the metal roof.
Okay.
Okay, so you're absolutely correct. Any electrical issues, outside of anything
Yeah.
having to be removed that's outside the building, this is going to be to seal the roof from the top
Okay.
in. But the thought process is with the rubber membrane roofing, we will be able to stop for a period of time the ice buildup underneath the rubber, what's been happening is we've been getting ice backing up under the metal roof. And then, of course, it gets in there, there's no insulation or not enough or improper, it melts, it leaks. Okay, this should stop that problem. Now that doesn't mean we can get away with this forever, but we're pretty good at ignoring problems until they become a big problem, and we don't want to do that anymore.
And the money is coming from,
General unallocated.
Mr. Chair, was there a reason why it's coming from general unallocated as versus capital projects?
Maybe I
Coming
misspoke.
out of the capital
I'm
project
sorry.
is what we talked about at the committee.
Yep,
No, say that it's coming from capital projects?
I misspoke.
Okay, because I've been checking the fund balances.
Yep.
So I wondered, the park department themselves, in looking at their fund balances, would not have enough to cover that?
It was not budgeted, and we budget the Parks Department at a zero, and they did not have enough fund balance at the end of 2013.
Okay, and projected at the end of 14?
Probably right about the same at the zero level.
Okay. Perhaps when we do our budget workshop next week, just one thing to consider is, in some cases, perhaps fund balances in departments, if there are any, should go to pay back this sort of thing so we can build our capital funds and some of those funds. I just throw out for your information that in the library budget, with the, frankly, it's been no increase for years in what we receive. And as part of our budget, we set aside a certain amount for cap. And it's money we can really not afford to set aside, but we've done it religiously. And some of you will remember, perhaps 4 years ago, when the library roof needed to be replaced. We did have sufficient funds in that capital budget that came from our library budget. There was no extra money from the city. And we did take care of it. And now we are attempting to rebuild it. And I'm not going to pretend it's easy, but we are very disciplined in trying to set some aside. So perhaps that's simply an item for discussion next week, because I think everybody agrees we've got some tough things to look at.
Thank you.
I just wanted to throw that out.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Did we have a
Second.
Yes, Dolly did second,
Okay.
yes.
Anything else? Mr. Evans?
Are you calling the motion approved? That's
Yes.
it then. End of report.
Okay. All right, well, we'll move on to Safety and Public Works.
There's no way I'm going to match that. We had a solid hour, and we had 8 and 9 that we did not finish. So we'll start out with item number 1,
That was
event/street.
taken care of in the consent.
Oh, that's right. All right. Item number 2, permit denial ordinance amendment. In the packet was a ordinance that was drawn up, but then there was a new one made out, and I think Dolly met for changing some of the language on there. So the motion is to accept this language that says granting or denial of permits. Upon payment to the city by the applicant of the required fee for any permit, and upon approval of the appropriate inspector, the permit shall be issued except where council approval is required, in which case the appropriate officer may issue the permit only after approval is granted by the council. Permit applications submitted by property owners or contractors who have been the recipient of any enforcement actions specifically related to building permits and/or any regulation, law, or ordinance regulating building permit activity shall be referred to the city council for approval or denial. And the motion would be to accept that language.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Item number 3, SEH revised agreement water tower. This took up most of the time, as everybody has seen what's been out there. There is quite a bit of money being spent out there, but this motion is for SEH's part not to exceed $10,000, and I would so move.
Second.
Any other discussion?
And this part here is to analyze, work with Jeff, our city, and to come up with a solution. And maybe, Jeff, you can jump in real quick here for a couple seconds to explain where this 10 is going to go.
Basically, this is going to be for SEH to put together some options and costs, associated costs for different rehabs for the structure. That'll be based on the reports that they received from Brainerd and the investigation that occurred a few weeks ago on the tower.
For everybody's information, Classic Protective Coating had already done their job out there. They are going to give us a deduct, according to Jeff, from the $25,000 that we approved. Brainerd and SEH was included on a $20,000 motion prior. Now SEH is pulling their 8 out of that, 8 to 10 out of that, and then Brainerd is going to go time and material. So we're trying to reduce the cost all the way around in as many ways as possible. So that would be the motion to accept SEH's revised agreement.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Item number 4, 1324 South 7th Street reimbursement request. The motion is to reimburse Jackie McDonald at 1324 for $1,035 as suggested by the city, and I would so move.
Second.
And it'll come out of the sanitary sewer fund.
Any other questions?
Yes, they alluded to the additional black dirt repair of the lawn, and be looking at additional expenses in that dirt purchasing.
Isn't asking.
Well, she did in the letter. She said, she alluded to the fact that it is the black dirt and the repair, and who's going to be paying for that.
Yeah, she did say I'll have to have black dirt hauled in and hire somebody to fix my yard. She did not, she just wanted the responsibility of $1,035, so that would be just the motion, and I think the rest of it she could, handle.
I don't think.
Yeah. So,
Any other questions?
good question.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Item number 5, 2014 tax forfeit parcels. The motion is to hold on all 4 parcels and put it in conservation and not to offer it for sale. And you've probably seen in here for the various reasons for city use, and I would so move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Item number 6, draft 5-year plan update. We had some discussion, and then we decided to set up a Safety and Public Works workshop on September 11th between 4 and 6 to discuss, because it's quite lengthy and it's going to take a lot of time. And we're looking for also input from the,
We're going to adjourn to that meeting. If you can make it, you can make it. If not,
That's September 11th from 4 to 6.
correct.
Council, or the,
it'll be in downstairs,
Conference
yeah, conference room. On there, just to let everybody know, 28th Street is on there, and that is, set for 2015. And the airport utility extension that's on there, that's going to have to be based on, the local option sales tax call. But the rest of that we'll all discuss and look at. So I really don't need a motion on that. It'll be just for everybody to, or do you want a motion for that to set a meeting? Don't really
No.
need one, okay. Item number 7, St. Francis bus service. This had a lot of discussion, and I'm going to let Mary take the motion.
Oh, gee.
Well, you said that you wanted to make sure that was done right.
Well, I did not. I would move that based on Crow Wing County's acceptance of the concept of providing the additionally subsidized rides to the St. Francis students to continue what happened the previous year, that it would be accepted through the year 2004.
2014, 2015 year.
And the school year, 2014, 2000.
And I think school year would be important to put in there.
Yes,
Yes.
through the school year.
And I would second that, and then we can continue with the discussion on it.
Is there discussion?
I just have one question. Did you talk at all what we're going to do the year after that?
No.
Okay.
Because the county representatives were really the ones who supported it. And they said that in the meantime, they would try to work something out with.
So they'll come to us again with some sort
I'm
of
sure
proposal?
they will.
Not necessarily.
I don't.
Or, it'll be the county
Okay.
more than likely, because most of those routes are out of the county.
Okay.
Or not out of the county, are out of the city.
Yeah, the ones that they're talking about, yeah,
Yep.
definitely
Yeah.
are.
Right. And so it would be, if they come to us, it'll just be probably at a joint meeting of the TAC committee.
Okay.
There was some concerns about the precedents we're setting here, and my answer would be the time constraints that was also placed upon this council, right before school, to make a decision. So that's why I'm going for it, and I think most of the council is, because we only had 2 weeks to work with, and most of the moving parts were in play.
Any other discussion? Yeah.
I don't know why this isn't part of the motion, but I'll certainly support it as is, but the original motion, which was made 2 weeks ago, and Mr. Sheeler referred to the timing of the thing, did include referring this to the Transportation Committee. And I guess I'm sort of surprised that this motion doesn't include that. I would have liked to have seen it.
That's why I let her make the motion.
It has been to the Transportation Committee.
No, for 2015, for what happens next.
Oh, that will automatically come.
Yep.
That'll be an automatic thing, because it's outside of what generally happens with them. So they'll have to bring that. If you want to include it or want it included, I'll be glad to do it. But it will happen.
It's just like a chain of custody kind of
Okay.
deal.
Well, let's
I wouldn't
put
mind
that-
to have
let's
it in the
make that
minutes.
part of the
Put that in the
motion.
Yeah, okay, as long as the motion and second are fine. All right,
I haven't heard Mr. Sheeler say that he's okay with it.
Yes.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Item number 8, historical structure grant application. I'm going to try winging this. The company that we're talking about is Preservation Design Works, Megan Elliott, and it's a private company, and what they're looking for is a fee around $1,200, not to exceed $2,000, and what they would do is basically, try to do the grant application for the water tower. In this fee, that would also include historic structural review, preparing a feasibility, reestablishing the historic look. I'm trying to read my writing. And aligning our goals with the grant funds, in-kind match, and narrative. And if there's anything I missed, but we didn't get any further than that because we had to rush along. So there was no motion to accept this out of our committee. It was just that's how far we got with it.
Mark, what's the timeline?
The grant has to be submitted by October 10th. I think Jeff aptly put it at the Safety and Public Works meeting. We could try to fumble our way through this grant submittal. We thought we had submitted a great grant application in June for design work, and we were all excited that, oh man, this $10,000 we're going to get that. Well, not quite. We received word from the state that we have a very worthy project, but our grant application for that design work was very incomplete. Like it or not, an historical defining feature of our water tower is the domed roof. If we expect any grant funding through the legacy program, through the state of Minnesota, we are going to have to address the feasibility of somehow designing a dome feature for that building. And that is some of the work that Megan Elliott and her firm will do. They won't design it, but they will provide the, what was the term he used? They'll provide the, they'll describe an option of how to do it and the feasibility of how to do it. We all think it's going to be impossible to design a domed structure to go on there. Well, we don't know that. We're all speculating. And we all think that it's going to be impossible to design a dome structure that's going to be practical. Well, we don't know that. We're only speculating. And that's what someone with the expertise and the knowledge of working with historical structures, historical architecture, historic preservation will be able to do, is look at that feasibility and provide recommendations for us. Now, we can always say, let's not put the dome back on there. It's just not going to, it's just crazy. Why do we want to put that back on? We could say that. What that'll mean is that we'll lose our national designation, National Register designation for the structure. And two, don't think about applying to the state of Minnesota for legacy funding for any grant funds. And from what I'm hearing, the only way that's going to be practical for us to restore and rehabilitate that structure is if we come up with some outside funding.
So you want us to do this?
And that is why we need to do this, from our perspective.
Would that be for a retractable dome?
Glass.
Maybe we could call Jerry Jones.
I just had a question. They're all kind of tied together. Where did we find out about this firm? Do we have any information on like success rate or referrals or anything for them? Because I know there's no guarantees with writing a grant, but
right.
I want to kind of hedge that a little.
The referral came from Dewey Thorbeck. Dewey Thorbeck is he's in charge of the Center for Rural Design at the University of Minnesota. That's the firm we're working with for the Mississippi Riverfront project. Dewey's an architect, and he suggested that Preservation Design Works was a very knowledgeable firm in working with historic structures. In fact, In Megan's, or in Design Works proposal, it actually talks about how Ms. Elliott has worked with historical concrete structures in the past. And she has knowledge in, there's something called the the Secretary of the Interior National Standards for Rehabilitation, something to that effect. And those standards have to be followed in restoration of an historic building or structure. And she would have the expertise to address those standards a lot more than we would. So do we have any other references? No.
Another quick question. Are we then going for just a $10,000 grant, or are we going for a slightly bigger or more grants with this?
$10,000.
Okay.
Now, so I would imagine, and Jeff and I were talking, SEH work is separate from what this work is. But I would imagine that the two firms may have to communicate somehow, because what SEH wants to do, or what preservation design work wants to do, may affect how SEH operates.
And I have a question for Patrick. In, grant writing, and I've been talking about it for the last year, that, I think, that we should be looking as a council for people that just specialize in grant writing, because staff don't have that expertise, and we expect them to get every grant they go for, and, with time constraints and their abilities, I'm for somebody professionally hired to do grant writing, that's what they do, and the success rate for our city would be a lot greater in those applications. We had somebody, and they'd also be accountable instead of staff, you hear the words deficiencies in your grant. Well, you wouldn't have that with, the right people hired for this. So I do think there's experts on this.
Mr. Wasso. I don't know that Gary asked me a question. He said he had a question for me. So.
Yeah, my question is, what's, from the city standpoint, do you feel that we have staff that are, fully qualified for this, or do you feel that we should be looking for outside help?
I think 95% of the time we have staff that can handle these. We do it all the time. I think there are some specialty situations like this. I've seen, last week or the week before, or in the last 2 weeks, the emails that correspond on this, 100 emails, I'll bet you, about what's going on, different options, what we're looking at. And in this case, it is a specialty. I think there are some others that we may want to explore, especially when we start talking $1 million grants for equipment or for projects. Then we may want to explore that and bring that up to the city council. I think this is an excellent opportunity by staff to say this is a little bit outside of our realm based upon the response we received earlier, and this would be appropriate.
You had another question?
I did have another question. Mark, you just indicated that did you have a quote from Preservation Design Works, our proposal?
Yeah,
one?
we have.
We should get a copy of that for the packet so that we can make that part of the permanent
Didn't
record.
you get copies of it?
I don't remember seeing a copy of it. So.
No, we have no copy. No.
Oh.
I was going by as fast
Because
as
he
you were
said he was
talking.
shooting from the hip, and I didn't see anything in the
I was
packet.
out of the office on Thursday and Friday, and
No, I have nothing. I just
The
wrote
last
as
thing
fast.
they have in their packet is Reichert, so that's why.
You could hire me as a court reporter, because I think I did pretty
I
good.
knew I should have sent an email this morning, but I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
But if you can get us a copy, that'd be
Yes.
great.
Mr. Chair, at one time, Region 5 had grant writers. I don't know if they still do or not, but they used to provide a lot of grant writing assistance to the units of government within the region. Do they still have that?
They have people that are in charge of specific areas that do the grant writing. I don't think they have any, one or two people that are specifically just there for
Did
grant
we
writing. But they
check
would
at
be
all?
somebody that would definitely be able to.
It seems like we ought to at least ask if they would have that kind of expertise. I think we do have to proceed with it. If we're going to proceed with the water tower at all, I agree that we have to do it. My concern is, first of all, have we looked to see if there is an alternative that might serve us just as well? And secondly, the completeness of what we'll get from that. Sometimes it's almost like one thing leads to another. It's $2,000, and it's another $2,000, then it's $5,000, and the picture is never complete. So whoever is hired, whether it's this person, Mark, or whether there's somebody at Region 5, I think there's some questions that should be asked so that we would know that the product that came out of that either was sufficient to let us know if we should proceed with this application, or if in fact we need then to go to another source and then still another one.
So what's
Sometimes-
your motion?
I don't have a motion.
Oh,
I'm just talking. I'm saying we're getting nickeled and dimed sometimes, or dollared and dollared. I would like to see us not do anything until at least a call could be made to Region. I would like to see that. You said October is the deadline on this.
Oh,
May
I
I?
could have a suggestion, or Mark.
Yeah.
Region 5 does not have the technical expertise to write this kind of grant.
They
I
would
know
not?
They do not. I know they do not.
Go ahead,
They are not
Patrick.
familiar with National Secretary of the Interior's national standards.
A good thing.
But
I
look
think
for
the
other things.
suggestion is good to keep that in the back of our mind, or at
It
least
could also
check
be
on
part
it.
of your motion that you would, if that's what you're so, to approve the recommendation, but first calling Region 5 to see if they have that expertise. If they don't, proceed with this, update the city council as to Region 5's
Well,
availability.
I would.
Second? No, I'll make that
I'll
motion.
second that motion.
Okay.
But I would like, in conjunction with a call to Region 5,
Yes.
Yeah, that's the
to
motion.
explain to them what we're looking for. And maybe they would even have names that we could access. Sometimes you
We can-
get hung up with
I have that motion.
Do
whoever.
do we have to
Did
earmark where
Patrick
that
the
money's
motion?
coming from?
The second came from Mary.
Connie, do you want to designate where this $1,200 to $2,000 is going to come from?
Capital project. The only.
Suggestion?
Probably just general and allocated
Where's the other water tower money coming from?
capital projects.
Stuff that you're paying the engineers and all that?
Seems-
It's capital projects.
Capital projects.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Mr. Bevins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I ask our engineer a question? Do we have any expectations on hearing back from SEH, Braun, and the Spider guys before the grant is due? And if I may explain my question and then let you answer it. Sometimes, and I think Mrs. Cope maybe was kind of thinking this, but I don't want to put words in her mouth. When you commit to the path of historic preservation, and we're just discussing this, that there's often a set of guidelines that must be followed. While there might be grant money available from the state of Minnesota and other places, sometimes it's not always the most economically feasible repair. If we're just trying to save the water tower, not necessarily make it a historically preserved to the letter facility, which I mean, it's not like we're offering tours of the thing. It's a thing that stands up on the street corner that could conceivably, I believe the figure that we talked about was close to $200,000 to fix the thing, to keep it from falling down both internally in the bowl and the facade or the plaster which has been falling off. And now we find that there's even more with the potential that there's water running down between the brickwork and the facade, and that's what's making that facade lose its adhesion and fall off. Those are all understandable technical building things that could need to be done to keep the thing standing, but wouldn't necessarily provide the letter of preservation of a historic building. My concern would be is, without hearing anything from from the people we've already committed to, as Mr. Sheeler said, where's that money coming from? Well, that we committed to budgeted $40,000. I'd like to hear back from them before we go down. Okay, now let's change gears and hire another engineer who's going to take us down the path of historic preservation, which may not be necessary or financially feasible in any way, shape, or form. My point is, to get to the point, is that if we could get something back from these people to say, This is about what it's going to take to keep the thing standing for another 10 years, 15 years, whatever. And if you guys want to spend X amount more on another engineer who's going to tell you how much more you have to spend to keep the thing historically preserved, boy, I'd like to know the first number before we commit to the second number.
Is that part of that motion?
No, it's a question I asked of the chairman, if I could ask of the engineer.
Yep.
I'm
We
just-
discussed that issue at length for about an hour in Safety and Public Works, as far as, a lot of the issues of the cost, and having 3 different brawn and everything else, but.
Right. It would just be nice to hear back from, I mean, the motion is what the motion is. In trying to determine my desire to support it, I would really like to hear back from the first people we've hired to see what it's going to take to keep the thing standing. Not historically preserved, just standing. Because if we're over 200 grand already, which is a number that came out of this meeting a couple weeks ago, or 2 meetings ago, I can't imagine that it's going to be less expensive to make it historically preserved.
Let me just quickly go back to item number 3.
Can I just have the engineer answer those questions first?
Yeah.
Can we have a reasonable expectation to hear from the people we've already hired prior to the due date to commit to this second line of engineering?
If I can respond, yes. In talking with Jeff Ledeen from SEH, they feel that they can have the report back to us probably by the 1st of October. So we could set up unfortunately, we've got a 3-week gap between council meetings, but we could have SEH here doing a presentation at the meeting on October 6th, which is, 4 days before the applications due. As far as SEH's scope, we do expect that we're going to have some options presented and costs for different rehabilitation, and I would expect that we would see something from them that addresses the historic preservation also, or any differences from their perspective, from their historic people, what they feel. If there's some rehab that we would not be able to do because of the historic listing, then I would hope that they would be able to inform us of that, or what additional costs may be associated with following an historic approach. So we will ask them to include something of that nature in their report.
And I'll go back to what we just said in item number 3 in our motion. And this motion said, SEH said a report will be developed and in the year of 2014. So they didn't really put a date down, and that was part of our motion of item number 3, accepting their, and that's all I wanted to mention to you, was they had the whole year to come back to us with the report. If we need to change that, then we should go back and change that motion, because we did give them the whole year according to their contract. We gave them the full year of 2014 to come back to it. Great question that you had. I just wanted to interject and say, we have a motion that they got the rest of the year.
While you contemplate that, can I ask a question? Yes, sir. Jeff, did we ever, I thought the number of $200,000 wasn't a firm number, that was kind of thrown out. I don't believe there's any justification for that number.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't be throwing out numbers, so I'm not sure exactly where that came from.
I thought we were talking about maybe that revenue might be generated if we had that one fee, but I don't think we ever said what the project scope was going to be.
And Mr. Chair, therein lies my point. We don't know. My thought would be, now that Mr. Sheeler has clarified the motion that we made with SCH, would be to, this motion is just to spend the 12 to 2,000, correct?
Yep.
My thoughts would be to accept the motion, but to go back and really try and put these two things together. I think the 12 to 2,000 could be money well spent, especially with a grant deadline and the possibility of it's a minimal amount to spend to somebody who's been recommended as a potential, I don't want to say expert in the field, but certainly somebody who, and I'm not, who may know as, who may be able to help this whole process. The other thing is it's possible that once we start that path, there might be financial benefits to the city as far as such as this $10,000 being an example. Mr. Oscar mentioned a couple other sources of funding that we would have been denied if we didn't choose to follow historic preservation. That being said, I will support the motion as is, but I'd like to revisit the deadline in motion 3.
Mr. Chair, could I ask if we apparently are going to proceed with this $2,000? Could we have that person come to council? There are a lot of questions. I think Alderman Bevins raises excellent points. And that was certainly part of what I was trying to allude to.
Well, I thought so.
And that is that, sometimes it isn't nickel and dime, but that's the expression we use. It's thousands and thousands. And you do this, and then you have to do that, or this doesn't work. It would be good if that person could come here and field some of these questions. I think every member of this council likely shares the concerns. What if it becomes a multi-million-dollar project? What if it becomes a multi-million-dollar project? What are we going to do? And we can't, we've already found out, you cannot tack $1 on everybody's vote. Cannot finance that. And there might be some difficult decisions that will have to be made. But if this person could come to the council and field some questions, I think our comfort level might be significant.
I'm losing this motion. Is that part of the motion?
No, it's just, I thought we voted on the motion.
No, we
don't.
haven't. The motion is wide open, so I keep wondering if we keep adding to it.
Well, I'm not having.
Oh, okay.
No. So, is there any other discussion? So the motion on the floor right now is to approve the grant writer, and I guess having staff try to coordinate the SEH people and the contract writer.
Not to exceed $2,000.
Right. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Item number 9, power poles. And this is a Mr. Bevins email, and I also addressed this concern earlier. We did not get into it a lot, but I'll start off with Eric on the legal end of things, because he just got going when we quit. So go ahead, Eric.
Thank you. I did have a chance to review one of the BPU's joint use power pole agreements with one of the entities here that has those agreements, but I understand that there are likely more of those agreements in place. Is that
There's probably 3 or 4, I would guess.
and generally it's it's a reciprocal agreement where we use some of their poles, they use some of ours, and then you pay the difference essentially, whoever has more poles. But there are provisions in there that allow for shared use of poles, and then what happens when one entity abandons the pole, either puts up a new pole, goes underground, or whatever. And in that case, this contract in particular, and I believe this is the standard contract language, as I understand it, allows for, if the communications company in this case does not want to transfer over to the new pole, they have a right of first refusal to buy the old pole for $1 and then assume ownership of it and the obligations that go with ownership. That is the agreement that I had, is a 40-year agreement, so it's a long-standing deal. I do not have the date that it started, so I don't know how much is left of that, but it does also include provisions in there for the owner of the pole to maintain it to industry standards and make sure it's sufficient to hold the weight of what it's holding. And then last point that I think I made in committee was that there are provisions in there to alter the agreement, but of course it requires mutual agreement on that, but there's a process where we give them 30 days notice with the proposed changes, and then that's to be worked out.
Is there something that, I'm going to ask this question, that we can stop them from proceeding to make new attachments to new systems until the past is cleaned up? Or until, they can get, we just said, we can stop them and say, hey, you're not going to, can we have something like that?
There are provisions for when they want to move on to a city pole. It has to be approved by the city. There has to be, it has to meet the standards. There's nothing that would tie it directly, as you say, to the maintenance of another pole, I guess.
But in the provisions, there is a maintenance clause, and if they're not maintaining that pole, there's rotten poles, they're using all the rotten poles and everything else. I'm looking for some teeth in this thing, and we don't have any right at the moment.
No, like I said, the contract requires the owner of the pole to maintain it, but there's no enforcement mechanism.
I think it's two separate issues. One is we've got contracts that may not be the way we have it doing business may not be the way we want to continue in the future. I'm confident that our attorney can work with PUC, and I certainly can make this motion that we share you, correct? PUC and
yes.
Yeah, all right. That you move towards that. My motion would be to direct staff, specifically our attorney, to look at revising those contracts, and I so move.
Second.
Any other discussion?
That's strictly to try and fix what we have now, as far as contracts with the utilities, as far as being able to dictate not having this problem in the future.
So then that would somehow incorporate a definition for maintenance?
Sure,
isn't
and
that
quantity
kind
of
of what it
poles in
comes
the
down
alley.
to here?
There's a couple of issues here that I see, Chip, that citizens have brought forward to me.
Right.
One is maintaining the poles as we abandon poles and sell them for $1. Well, there's an enforcement issue, but there's also a situation where we can end up with 5 or 6 different sets of poles. Let's just say Charter, and I'm not meaning to pick on Charter, wants to keep this set of poles, so they pay $1, and then another utility wants to, we'll keep this set of poles, so there's another set of poles in your alley. And now the cable company or the telephone company says, well, we'll take these for $1, and now there's a third set of poles in your alley. There's maintenance of the poles, but there's also, really, can't we consolidate these? A lot of them are moving underground. The problem is becoming more moot, but I think our attorney can probably at least start the process of, is there a way to consolidate as well as maintain these orphans throughout the city of Brainerd?
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow up on that point, so the agreement provides for a mechanism whereby when we're going to not use the pole anymore, we give notice and an opportunity for them to relocate, if we put in a new pole, for example.
Sure.
They have a chance to do that. If they decline, then they get the right to buy the pre-existing pole for $1. So the simplest way would be to remove that provision, allowing them to buy the old pole.
Sure would be.
Generally, when Brainerd Public Utilities do an aesthetic cleanup in an area, we would like the rest to follow. And that's the intent of this whole thing. Okay, they went underground, they cleaned up the area, and we're hoping the other utility will come follow and bury theirs and clean up the area with the aesthetics.
Yeah.
Just to clarify too, because this is BPU's agreement, we're making a recommendation for them to modify their agreement.
Correct. Yep, absolutely. But we use the same attorneys.
You betcha. Want to make sure we all understand who he's working for that.
And I have a second motion, but we see how this
Okay.
one
Any other discussion on that?
Is there a sunset you want this brought back to?
You know, I didn't.
I just sometimes hate to see 3 years from now.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think this is going to be a 5-minute thing. I
No.
would say 60 days to at least have a progress report.
Yes is the answer.
Yeah, okay.
That would be.
I mean, it's going to be a little bit involved just to look at all the agreements. They may not all be the same.
True. I thank you for it. Just any sunset.
Yep, I agree, Mr. Sheeler. Good idea.
Any other discussion?
Yes. So if you could do it sooner, I guess, it sounds like
Yeah.
it shouldn't be a problem. But I think it goes back to when we were talking about the coordination of work, you know, in between when we install new poles and allowing other utilities to know what we're doing. And the city engineer said that the communication is actually quite good between the coordination of work, so that it shouldn't be a problem moving forward. The time frame for attaching to new poles, I mean, if we're going to remove that verbiage, then I guess that was just my note in regards to if we're going to remove it, then we don't need to worry about a time frame for reattaching. But you had mentioned something about the obligation of ownership, meaning if our industry standards change. So when you look at rotten poles or height requirements, if they're changing, it's an automatic. I see this time frame immediately taking effect. So I guess those are all of the things that, to me, just screams, why is this even a problem? We need to move forward with it. I guess I just wanted to throw that out there, that you have something to sink your teeth into, and that would be your number one deal is the ownership of obligations. So I guess I just want to put my 2 cents in there to, you know, I'm not understanding why this is a problem.
I just wanted to ask if some of the utility companies have bought these poles for $1. They are then theirs.
Yes.
So will that in any way make it more difficult for some other agreement? They bought them in good faith, and they're theirs. So now do you go and say, and by the way, you have to take it down?
The agreement would address, if we made changes to the agreement, it would be going forward.
Okay, so what exists,
So,
exists.
yeah, that's a second
Okay,
issue.
just so we
I
need
think.
to understand.
But there's also the OSHA and the safety standards that go with a pole too. And I have a question on that because you wrap a pole, you know, a pole climber, they wrap it and they, you know, it starts falling apart and you got to remove it. That's not happening. These are all old rotten poles. That's why Brainerd Public Utilities left them. And there's that issue that I have, that you've got a rotten pole and they're just going to leave them up until the wind blows them over. And that isn't by OSHA standards for them. They're non-climbable poles. They've got to be removed. You know, there's a safety thing that we have to.
Well, they rarely climb anymore. They've got the hydraulic
Yeah.
lifts, so.
We're getting there. One motion at a time.
I guess that's the
Yeah.
obligation of ownership, where I'm trying to be able to go backwards to say this. Yes, we got all this information to go forward, but in order to be able to loop and go backwards, it's to say because our industry standards have changed, these poles are rotten or the height requirements have changed. That gives us that ability to be able to go backwards and look at, you know, the problem areas that do exist currently.
So I have a second to Mr. Bevan's motion.
Yes, on the record.
Yep. So, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Mr. Bevins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a second motion with this, and that's to deal with the existing problem. And that's to have direct staff, and we've done this before with one utility with success. They moved some of their stuff, it's my understanding. I mean, I didn't stand there and watch them, but I have heard that they moved some stuff. So my second motion to deal with the existing problem would be to identify the exact poles, who owns them, and what utilities are still on them, and to write them a letter for the reasons stated in Mr. Sheeler's previous argument on the last motion, to remove them, to move their stuff and remove them. They're, what did you say? The responsibility of ownership requires that they move them or replace them with new poles, but we prefer them to remove onto the new pole. And please do so immediately, and respond to the city in writing. And I'd put a deadline of that
And
tomorrow.
I'll second
No.
that if that's still going on.
2 weeks. Yeah, I'd say 2 weeks from tonight.
And you want BPU to do this? Because they're the ones who
I
have all
just
the
said
knowledge.
staff.
I'm just-
BPU is certainly staff, our attorney is staff. Just find out who they are. Say, we've got these poles that are falling down, non-usable, hazardous. Identify the poles, identify the offending utilities, and suggest that they, I mean, we can ask, you may find that they move them. It's just, and respond within 2 weeks.
And I have a second to that. And I have one more question to all of this. On Mill Avenue, they removed the stuff off the poles. The poles are still there. Now, how does that make this different if they have nothing hanging on the pole and that they are allowed to abandon it, not pull it out, but all the ones on Mill Avenue on the, are just cut off, nothing hanging, and they removed everything, but the poles are still there. So that creates a different issue because they don't have anything hanging. They bought it for $1, and now they're going to abandon them. So who removes the pole now?
I just sharpened my chainsaw this week.
So this issue just keeps growing.
In any pole that we sell or gets abandoned, does the city still retain liability for that pole?
Not according to if it's sold to the utility or other.
And that's spelled out in the contract?
Yeah.
Mr.
City
Chair?
wouldn't own it anymore, and the communications company or whoever's using the pole, they have to have their own right to be there. I mean, they have to have their own easement or whatever it might be to have a power line there and a pole set up, and then they own its personal property there.
But they still have to follow OSHA guidelines.
Sure.
So maybe a phone call to OSHA.
Mr. Bevins?
I think the two motions take care of this issue as well. The first motion, taking care of going forward, there has to be you're done, it's got to be removed within 30 days, part of any new agreements. That was the first motion that was passed. The second motion is to identify the poles. We've got some more on Mill Avenue. Mr. Sheeler just brought them up. Identify the utility. There's somewhere there should be a purchase agreement for $1. I'll be surprised if you can produce any of those purchase agreements. But that being said, there should be a purchase agreement, so there should be a utility responsible for removing them. You got to start by identifying to them the problem. You've got abandoned poles that you own. You bought them for $1. It's time to get them out of here. Please remove them within 30 days. Or some time frame.
Any other discussion?
I just feel uncomfortable with the second question because I don't really know enough about what the situation actually is. And I'm hesitant to go in and tell a company who owns them and whatever their use may be that you remove them and you remove them in 30 days. I don't know if they're hazardous. Some may be, some may not be. I would certainly have preferred if a letter was sent to them identifying the issue, what we see as a problem, and trying to work with them. Hopefully it'll work, but if they come back and have their legal team giving us reasons why they don't have to do it or shouldn't have to do it, how much time are we going to spend on it? There's one certainly good point, if it's a hazard. If it's rotten, and it's obviously so. But if it's just a pole sitting there, I don't know why they would leave it there. I honestly don't. But I presume because there's some cost to them to remove it. I don't know that. I'm just not feeling comfortable. We're talking about private property. We're talking about utilities that pay taxes. We're talking about ownership here. It seems to me there might be a slightly more tactful way to deal with the second question.
If I'm not mistaken, your motion basically is to identify
If they
those
own it,
and to send a letter.
Yep, correct.
Yep.
And to respond within 2 weeks.
Yeah, Mary? I think that what his motion and the second basically is to identify those poles and then send them a letter. And then from there, I think some of the concerns that you have of how they react is what would.
Okay, as long as a letter, I think he said a letter would say, get them out in 30 days. And I feel like they should have the opportunity to respond. And so there may be things we don't know about. That's my concern. So does the motion say, get them out in 30 days?
Nope.
Or does it, all right, so that is not part of the motion. All right. And I can support it.
I need one question.
Patrick.
Can you clarify, are we just the ones on Mill Avenue and the ones that used to be charters, or are you saying citywide? I guess I need to clarify where.
Well, I would like to, I don't know where they all are, but the first portion of the motion is to identify.
All poles.
Yeah,
that have been
citywide,
sold. Okay.
but I don't know that we can do that. We know of the ones on Northeast. Mr. Sheeler just brought up the ones on Mill Avenue.
There's some between Pine and Oak.
There could be tons more than I'm not aware of.
That's what I'm saying, because it might take longer than just 2 weeks to identify all the poles.
The 2 weeks is the response. Okay, so if we in 15 days, if we find some more, let's write the letter then.
Because it's very easy when I'm with the staff to go through the street and alleys, and they can say, that's ours, that's theirs, that's ours, that's theirs. So they do know this, they have records of it.
There should be a stack of $1 purchase agreements somewhere, but I bet there's not. But there could be. There should be.
And from my perspective of this whole thing, real quickly, is they're leeching off of Brainerd Public Utilities poles and their costs of installing them. And if I came up with a new communication company and wanted to come into town, I would spider my way, like a spider web, over all these poles in town for $1 a piece. It's very inexpensive for them to do that. And they come in town like Charter and just wham, they hit all the poles and there's communication everywhere using somebody else for $1. So I don't feel sorry for the removal part.
Eric?
I was curious, what if some of those vacant poles are those from which the Brainerd Public Utilities removed the streetlights when they were ordered to do so a few years ago? You remember that, do you not?
I wasn't on the council.
You weren't? Oh, well, we ordered a certain number of streetlights to be removed, and of course it led to a great deal of consternation for a while. But first of all, they were turned off, and then I believe the lights were removed, although I'm not. And so the poles are probably still sitting there, so perhaps part of these poles will be our own. Very interesting.
I just wanted to clarify Councilmember Sheeler's last point that this issue is the $1 a pole issue is when the city has vacated the pole and then sold it. If they're attached to a city pole, otherwise they're paying rent for that. Just like also the city uses Charter Communication, CenturyLink poles also, and then it's offset. The rents are offset between who uses more of whose poles. So the $1 a pole thing is just if the city has chosen to vacate or abandon that pole.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification. I have one quick question. Mary said this is private property, that those poles are. That is not private property, even though they own the pole. It's still the right-of-way.
It depends on where it is. Some of it's private property.
Well, but the pole itself is not private once they own the pole. Would that be private property then? Do they own the property around the pole?
And they have the easement right there, then that's their right. That wouldn't be a public pole at that point, if that's the question.
Okay.
But it depends. I mean, there's so many poles and
A lot of
so many locations that I'm a little hesitant.
Any other comments?
That's why we need more charter members. Get on it. Keep those people.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And we forgot one more thing, because we had 9 items. I'm going to add item number 10, and that is a letter to the law firm of Breen and Pearson to let them know what we're doing with the tower, being they're investing quite a bit of money. And so the motion from here is to direct staff to send a letter to them and update them, with all the concerns of the water tower.
Second.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
End of report.
Thank you. Okay. 8C, the Walkable, Bikeable Ad Hoc Committee. Mary, you wanted that pulled off?
I did, if I may,
Yep.
Mr. Chair. I did read it over, and perhaps I simply missed something, but I didn't think it was clear if there might be a cost to the city. I know there was talk of going to the initiative fund, et cetera, but how much of that is for certain, and how much may end up being a city cost?
The only city cost that I'm expecting would be staff time to assist in whatever activities the Region 5 will be doing. There's going to be no money expended for the audit.
Okay, and then I did read it over, and parts of it concern me because it talks about identifying areas without sidewalks, et cetera. Simple identification is one thing, but, and I can't ask how the council will use it because I have no clue how the council will use it. You know, I'm not sure how the council will use it. But again, I'm getting back to what frankly I thought was a lot of misery, that not just for the council, but for the people in the 9th Avenue area on the sidewalk, where many of them felt it was really pushed onto them and they didn't want it. They felt they had a lot of reasons, good reasons. And I hope something like this would not be used. There's a part of it here that says, under item 4, City Council action to adopt the walking, biking audit findings. If that study were to take place, and then the audit comes forward, and the council adopts, then forevermore the council kind of uses that as their excuse to go forward with things without the real involvement of the neighborhood involved. And that part really bothers. I'm questioning the necessity of this. I guess that's really what I'm questioning at this, is, why are we doing it? I mean, why are we doing it?
Well, I can give you an answer.
I'd like that.
In order for the Walkable Bikeable Committee to have any credibility in their recommendations it's going to make to the City Council, it needs data. It needs facts. It needs to know. It needs to understand what we have in the community, both for walking amenities and bicycling amenities. For them to be making any kind of recommendations to this body without any facts to base it on is ridiculous. So they need to start somewhere. And what this does, it provides that data to them to understand what we have as an asset in our community, or what we're lacking, or where the gaps are in our community. It is not intended, and is not planned to say we're going to put a sidewalk between 8th and 9th on H Street. That's not what it's intended to do. It's intended to give the committee information it needs to take the next step and work with recommendations. And you're very likely going to be seeing something coming forward on a bicycling audit as well.
What?
A bicycling audit. So,
My response to that is a city council action. So I don't know why one council member would question the rest of the council's action.
Well, I guess every council member questions everything that they see fit. We're individuals. That's our job.
Okay.
But this is strictly on the walkability.
Mm-hmm. If you look on the second page, there's about a dozen examples of what the walking audit will do.
That's what I'm looking at, Mark. That's exactly what I am looking
Where
at.
it doesn't say any place in there recommending location of new sidewalks.
No, but it does talk about missing sidewalks.
Right.
So if someone decides they're missing, that would seem to maybe lead to the next one. Something that I think is notably missing in those statements are the compatibility of walking and biking on a sidewalk. And I know there are other people who feel very strongly about that. And many communities do not allow biking on sidewalks.
Mm-hmm.
I think the goal would be to have lanes so they wouldn't have to, or wouldn't do that. But
I would not want any value judgments to be made on providing data. And to have a discussion about the value of riding on a sidewalk is getting into a policy thing. And this is not intended to get into policy.
This follows our comprehensive plan, right?
Well,
Not
there are
really.
goals in the comprehensive
Not
plan
really.
that
I
talk
don't see-
about.
I don't see where it identifies anything in the comprehensive plan.
Well, it doesn't state it, no.
No, absolutely. This strikes me as it's kind of a
Is there a
waste of
motion?
money.
There is not yet.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any other discussion?
Yes, I do. I have some discussion because there's a lot of redundancy in their overview of what their plans are doing. Merely because we've already established a task force. We've got a walkable, bikeable community, or walkable, bikeable committee.
Mhm.
They've been meeting for 10 months,
Mhm.
up to a year. It's notifying the public, getting their feedback. It's,
Mhm.
I guess my question is, are we, as a bikeable, walkable committee task force, going to bring this company up to speed? So the 65 hours that they're quoting for time, the 48.75, isn't spent on just reinventing what we already know. Evaluating things that we can obviously already share with them. I guess I'm looking at this as they're a third-party company that's going to observe our community in popular areas and use their expertise of what is missing in your community. That's, I guess, what I'm understanding, but it seems like a lot of their hours are actually spent in developing a task force and getting public input and kicking off meetings. And you see what I'm saying? It just seems redundant to stuff we've already done, that we could just bring them up to speed and we could allow them to use their hours more valuably on observing our community.
Well, good question, but I would have to caution the council, the Walkable Bikeable Committee has not done any of that yet. They don't know, they haven't conducted neighborhood meetings. They haven't analyzed anything in the city yet.
That I totally, I get that. I totally understand that part of it. But what I'm saying is that the whole developing a task force. I mean, we're starting this over again. They've already been developed.
Yeah,
work with them.
The Walkable Bikeable Committee is the task force. It'll be some representation of members of the Walkable Bikeable Committee, staff, and Region 5. We're not going to create another committee. Definitely not going to do that.
That created a question for me then, based upon this proposal was submitted for May of this year. Is it feasible that we're going to get it done in a decent walking season before snow and ice get on them?
Yeah, good question. I did talk to Region 5 about that, and it could very well be cutting it close this fall if the weather turns bad early. So we may have to wait until next spring to do it, and they're okay with that.
Well, the weather turning bad isn't in this year's budget, so that can't happen.
Big
We'll have
budget,
to-
no snow. Is what you're
That's correct. Yeah. No more rain, too. We're all up.
Yeah, so that is an issue on timing.
Then we can blame the engineering.
Any other discussion on this?
Jeff had a question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to echo Alderman Bevins' comment that, yes, you can always blame us for weather. But no, actually, we have a lot of the data already that they're talking about in terms of sidewalk condition. We've been collected a lot of data for our ADA transition plan with curb ramps, cross slopes, those types of things. So I think a lot of the organizational items that they're talking about. I think a lot of the stuff that the data that we need to collect that you can see before the snow falls, we have a good portion of it already. So I don't think it's going to be as time critical. I think it is something that if we do get early snow, we still have a lot of data we can move forward with.
Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries.
We got the straight.
We already did 9A. We did the first reading for the permit denial. Okay. 9B, public hearing for the final reading of proposed ordinance number 1419, an ordinance providing for the annexation of certain property located in unorganized first assessment, Rowan County, to the city of Brainerd. And if you remember, that's the property that's by the dam. So I'll open up the public hearing at 9:03. Is there anybody here for the public hearing on the annexation? Anybody here for the annexation? Third. Oh, is there anybody here? Okay. Close the public hearing at 9:03 and a half.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Move to hold the final reading of proposed ordinance number 1419.
Second.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Oh,
No?
No.
Next,
Okay.
next one, okay.
next one.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Move to adopt ordinance number 1419 by roll call.
Second.
Any other discussion? Okay.
Cope,
Yes.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Matten,
Yes.
Bevins,
Yes?
Sheeler.
Yep.
Orkanagan.
Yep.
Parks.
Yes. Okay, 9BB. Didn't notice there were two Bs there. Ordinance, public hearing process. A couple of council people have asked a question regarding when we need to have the public hearing, and came from the last meeting when Mr. Osgarden indicated that there was a good opportunity at that first reading to do the public hearing on a first reading. And I know, Chip, you had asked that question, and I know I had. And I guess I don't know what started or what the legal process is. I know that some of the things that Mark has, they already have the public hearing before it comes to us. We also then do a public hearing, but we do it on the second reading. And the question is, I guess, is does it make sense to continue doing it? Or two questions. One, does it make sense to continue doing that? But more importantly, is there anything that prohibits us from changing it if that's what the council so desires?
I had a question the last time that we were on there, and I'll give it, it'll be the vacating of 24th Street on Oak Street. The first reading actually was in the consent calendar. I'm going to oppose it, but by accepting, the consent calendar, I ended up saying yes to it, but it was put right in with the consent calendar as a first reading. So
Wasn't that actually the setting of the hearing
That was
date?
setting the hearing.
yeah,
So
and
that wasn't actually a hearing or a reading.
What-
That was just a setting of a hearing date.
the public hearing.
The setting of the public hearing, not, you
But
weren't
it was
approving the ordinance by any steps. I'm sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt.
no, and I agree with you, but that was considered like a first reading, and then the second reading is the public hearing.
Not in that case. That was just a setting of the hearing for the very first one.
The action for a vacation is not an ordinance. That would just be by resolution.
Okay,
So what we had on the consent calendar was just setting the date for the hearing.
okay, that's what I was, and then basically, so I ended up voting to go with it. To me, that's something that's being done in planning and zoning,
Yep.
or it should be, and then that's where they have their public hearings.
And if I may add, I think that was part of the concern. I mean, going back to the last city council meeting when we were talking about rezoning a parcel, when the public hearing takes the process in the planning and zoning, they go through the process of notifying all the property owners within 350 feet. Public comment is taken, the planning commission makes a recommendation, the record is supposed to accurately reflect what transpired at that meeting and is shared with the city council. If the city council then holds another public hearing, I guess the staff-wise, we question, does that not defeat the purpose of the public hearing that was held earlier? And we all have different opinions too on that, but that's one of the questions we have. And then as far as when the council, let's just say it's a simple ordinance change of fees, how we're charging fees, and the council holds a second reading, or when they hold the hearing, if it's at the first reading or second reading, I guess some clarification would be helpful for us on that.
And if I was going to jump in, it's in the paper, when it's at planning and zoning. It's televised at planning and zoning, and everybody's notified at planning and zoning, almost to a fault, because you really go out there, and so everybody can see it just like they are here. And then to be redundant and take that same scenario and bring it back to the council, I question that myself.
Well, Mr. Chairman, very often there's no one here. And very often there really is no time spent because no one's here for those hearings. The opportunity is there, though, if it is an issue that has a lot of public concern. And I really would believe that the greater opportunity you give the public, the better it is. And much of the time, because they're not controversial, there's no one here. So it isn't taking any time. So you've got it in the paper, but it's not taking time. But when it is, when it's controversial and people probably shown up at the Planning Commission, but they want to come, we are their elected body. They want to come before their elected body. I think that opportunity should be there. It doesn't happen very often, maybe once or twice a year in my recollection for years and years, that something is controversial and something is of great concern to the public. Give them that opportunity. If I believe that our planner has said he believes it would be more productive to have the public hearing at the first reading, I believe you said that, Mark. If not, I'm sorry. Okay, he did. And that's something that, if we can consider that, the attorney sees no impediment there. I think that might be
And that kind of was my
right.
question.
I would certainly
not getting rid of that necessarily. But
I'd be very willing to try that. But I would not want to see us discard the opportunity for the public, because that's really what we're all about, is serving the public. So the more opportunity you can provide the public, I think the better.
My concern would be the bypassing then of planning and zoning and saying, I'm going to take it to the council and just bypass it, even if they have a public hearing, don't be prepared because the council's going to hear it anyway. So, knowing that if the council's going to take that on, a lot of people are going to bypass that committee.
I don't think they have. I don't think that's happened. I think the Planning Commission is overwhelmed sometimes. So I don't think that'll happen. Honestly, I don't. But I think that the opportunity.
Are there anybody have any other discussion? Bevan?
I agree with Mrs. Cole. I think this is it. This is where representation, where the rubber meets the road. I think if the Planning Commission holds a public hearing to make its determination to recommend to the council, that's legitimate. If the council holds a second public hearing, not to look for reasons to contradict the planning department, or that's not it at all. And we may have heard everything that happened at the Planning and Zoning Commission, but there might be new people here with different ideas. I think to take the time, and Mrs. Cope's correct, a lot of times it isn't a lot of time, but sometimes it is, and sometimes you catch people at one that you don't catch at the other. And I think to take the time to listen to them is not only a good idea. I think it's kind of our obligation for being here.
Do you have a preference?
I would prefer the public hearing at the first reading, and strictly from the perspective of that's when people I think would be easier to be
Fresher
here.
in their mind.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't think it matters, but I think I would prefer the first reading.
Do we need a motion to change?
Or do you want a consensus?
Or do we need staff to investigate, or no?
Let me put it into writing for everybody. Let me formulate whatever has been said so that's all in writing. And if it's okay, if I know Dave's got a question, if I call it a public comment period rather than a public hearing, so that's a little less confusion on staff's part or my part, are you okay with that?
Well, just so
the public knows that they have an opportunity to speak.
Exactly.
And so if I call that, or we call that a public comment and put it into formalization, I think that's a little bit
And I agree with Mr. Bevins on bringing it back to the first reading. My question was, when we went through planning and zoning, and then we'd have a first reading and a second, and carry this thing on. I agree. First reading, boom, it's over and done, and we got a chance to hear from the people, so I have no problem with that.
I was just basically going to say that I can understand what Mr. Sheeler's talking about. He doesn't want to devalue the planning and zoning process, and I can't speak for everybody on planning and zoning, but I don't feel that that's the case at all. I think that getting public input is an important thing, and even if it's the same thing that I heard in the planning and zoning, sometimes it's more meaningful to hear it yourself rather than read the minutes on that. And there's some people that can't make the first meeting because of scheduling. Have them come. It doesn't seem like to be like it's a big time draw, so that's all I want to say.
So I'll put something in writing based upon the comments tonight. I don't see a problem with getting that on the next meeting, but it might be out of the office for a couple of days next week. So.
Is everybody okay with that?
Absolutely.
We'll bring it up at the next meeting and vote on whether we want it at the first or the second. Okay. Budget workshop next Monday. Staff is looking for direction and, what information do you want? You sent me an email saying that you didn't get much input. I don't know.
Not since the workshop, no, I've not received a lot of questions.
So does anybody have any thoughts now that they want to?
What would you like us to present for next week? If you're going to call it for the 8th, I'm assuming that's what we talked about. What information do you want us to provide in addition to what you already have?
In addition, I have none. Comfortable for
what we got.
Yeah, very comfortable with that.
Okay.
I was just thinking, just from last time, I'd like to see a prioritization.
Mm-hmm. And is that by department head or?
I wouldn't mind seeing both, actually. Prioritization within the department, and then kind of something, like what your perspective or a combined perspective would be. This is the order of importance.
Okay.
And a little reasoning as to why X takes priority over Y.
Okay. Is there a direction that the council sees? I mean, I'm not going to say the number again because the newspaper will just print it again, Jessica. But we all know what that number was last week, and is there a directive that your council's looking for us to be at? I mean, I can tell you Mrs. Copes mentioned to me several times, 0. I mean, that's the only direction other than adding things that I've received.
For me, just to say a flat number to put the levy at is not even fair to the budget. So, it would, by working with each item and reducing them to a certain point so that they're not depleted, and then see how that affects the levy is how I'm
I think the council needs to set priorities too. So I think the work is more for the council than for the staff at this point. I think the staff has given us all kinds of information, but I believe it's our job to go over that and come up with our own recommendations. So, we had a 12% increase last year. We had, I'm saying it again, $382,000 of new money, and we still had an increase, huge increase. We have another, I believe, $50,000 additional money this year, Mr. Busso, approximately in state aid. Approximately.
It was more than that technically.
Well, okay, let's get that laid out.
That was part of the presentation. I don't recall.
Yes, and then let's see what we can live with. I think that's the way we need to. What can we live within? What can we do without? What are our priorities? Certainly you can't say that everything's a priority.
Does anybody have any specific thoughts on how they want that meeting to be presented or held?
I think we need another presentation to the extent of the one we had.
No,
I
what
would think
about
everybody's got that
what
one.
about
down.
Individuals?
I think you just ask each person
person
down the line
down
by
the
then,
line.
and I'll have a number that I can reduce it by if I'm going that route.
Okay.
I've been working on it, so I'll have specific items, and perhaps others will also, and we can go kind of from there.
I think with the comments we've received, I think that'll help us because, I mean, what you're commenting about priorities, but also if you don't do A, are there trickle-down effects that B needs to be replaced or maintained or what has to happen? And what will happen is, you know, longevity. So it'll give us some direction.
Great. Okay, so we will adjourn to that meeting at 8 o'clock, or September 8th at 6 o'clock. Everybody okay with that? That's next Monday, okay. New business. Northland Arboretum Compost Project Assistance Request.
This is included in your packet. Mayor Pauline, I believe, is on the board for the Northland Arboretum, so
Yes.
he's very intimate knowledge of what's going on there. I was contacted by the executive director. I believe most of you have met through her time here, and she's indicated that she had been working with the city of Baxter on the possibility of creating a new compost site at the Northland Arboretum. That happens such that they've decided to hold off on making their decision for a year or two. They're asking the city of Brainerd specifically to provide a front-end loader for a period of 2 hours at the site. That doesn't include travel time to and from, to go in one time, flip, rotate the material. That assumes a normal season. Maybe in November, it's really a warm November, we might have to go back there a second time. There was some initial discussions about some additional dollars. Northland Arboretum's taking care of that, so all we're asking is for authority to send one of our employees and one of our pieces of equipment outside the city of Brainerd to take care of this. For essentially another alternative at no cost to the residents of Brainerd and Baxter, taking care of both communities to take the yard waste.
I would make a motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
I certainly support the motion. I have two questions. One from Mr. Mayor Wallin, and that's why it doesn't, this request, which is from our city administrator, doesn't say why that they want to move the compost site, but I know it's been closed for almost a year. And the second question would be of our engineer, and that would be just, you know, is this something our staff, I know it's something our staff can do, but is it, would the engineering department agree that, would recommend this?
Yes, we have in the past assisted the Arboretum with a number of items, either with their old compost pile, or once in a while we'd send a grader out there to help them grade some roads. So from time to time we've assisted them. So sending a loader out for a couple hours to turn a compost pile is not a big deal for us.
And if I may answer Mr. Bevan's question as far as why the compost area that has been used is way too small. The amount of leaves and to be a workable area, and have you been out there?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's small, and what they're doing is making it a lot larger and a lot more user-friendly for people who bring out leaves and stuff like that.
Okay.
One of the reasons why Baxter at this point has more than said that, and if you read the article in the paper, is that number one, right now they're contracting with Hengel, and Baxter pays Hengel to have someone there so that when people come out to Hengel's, and for some people in Baxter it's actually closer than what the Arboretum is, but when they bring stuff out there, they want leaves and yard waste. They don't want mattresses, tires, and stuff like that. So they actually have a signed agreement with Hengel for this coming year, for at least this year for sure, this coming year. So they will continue to have that ability to take it out to Hengel's. One of the other problems that Baxter feels is coming up this following year is that street is going to be tore up, both city of Baxter and Brainerd, and it's going to make it more inconvenient or kind of a hassle for people to get and bring the leaves and yard waste out to the new compost area. And that's why they kind of felt that they were going to wait until the year 2016 I had a long conversation with Mayor Olson on that, and that's their feeling is that with the road construction coming up this following year, rather than have some people do it this year and then not have good access to it next year, they're looking at doing it in the year 2016. Yes.
As a new resident of Brainerd and a tax-paying citizen of Crow Wing County, just so everybody does know, the county does maintain a site on 210, and you can take yard waste there, you can take branches there, as I visited many times this summer. And that's free of charge, just as an FYI also, until the site gets operational.
And that's at the dump, actually.
Yes,
Dump
the
site, yes.
dump site. But they check that you're a resident, they check, and then they were on a first name basis with me and my truck, so.
Dolly?
I spent way too much time on this, obviously, then, today, because, Patrick, this says once this year.
Yes.
But their letter said once a month. And I know that was so can you clarify this?
Yeah.
Because the letter dealt with, they were thinking that it was going to start earlier, they were dealing with Baxter, they realized it's going to take several weeks to get this organized, so it's really just once in October is what they're
Okay, so
thinking.
then what will happen next year? We agree to do this now, are we agreeing to once a month next year?
This is just this year.
Just for this year. So this, you don't have to worry about next year.
Next year, we'll worry about
I'm
it
just
then.
I always want to know what's in it, I guess, what's in it for Brainerd. And it's nice to have it so close to the residents, but I'm always looking at a bartering system as far as the arboretum and our problems with the flowers downtown. And, you know, if we do this for you, what can you do for us? So, but if that's just a one-time deal, I just want to make sure that we're not.
And there's a lot of people that don't know what Pat just mentioned, that you dump
Right.
off the leaves and brush for free.
I would
Yeah,
like
because-
to,
If I may,
Yeah.
this is mainly for yard, what I call leaves mainly. As Patrick said, the county, and that's 8 miles from my house, by the way, whereas the Arboretum is about a mile. But the Crow Wing County does take brush, they take other refuse, they take, about anything, that you need to take out there. Whereas this is strictly leaves and stuff like that, so. And it is convenient for a lot of local people within town that say they don't have a truck, but they have a car and they have a few bags of leaves. It's a lot easier for them to go to the Arboretum, dump it, and then, instead of going out to either place. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
real quickly, for the residents that are raking their lawns onto the streets for Jeff's sweeper in the fall, this would be a great program for them to use, because I see many of them in the fall thinking because the trees are in the boulevard that they can just rake them out in the streets, and you see that all the time. So this would be a great program for all of those people.
If I can add, we do have an ordinance that prohibits raking leaves in the
I
street.
see it all over.
So
Big
we
pictures.
if we do catch somebody, we do notify them that they cannot do that.
Can I bring up an interesting point? I'd love, and C.L. Anderson was really just the neatest mayor, as well as, being governor and all that stuff. But I remember back when he was around and stuff like that, and you were not engineer then, but what he would do would be, he would call up the city and say, when are you going to be coming by my house? Because I want to have all my leaves out in the street so they could sweep it up for him. And I should say, I'm not being disrespectful of the governor, but I remember him at meeting asking when they were going to be sweeping, because he wanted to have it picked up. And
You just threw him under the bus.
no, he was a neat mayor, and I no disrespect for him, but I found that just about as interesting as it, because back then we had it where you could not put it into the street.
Did you notice, Mayor, I didn't call out none of those residents I saw rake?
All in
I'm
favor,
sorry
say
about
aye.
it.
Opposed, same sign.
No,
No, okay.
I'm in favor of it.
Unanimous.
Okay.
Unanimous. Okay, I'm going to probably pass this on to Chip. 10B, the proposal to change Columbus Day to Native Peoples Day.
I just think that the easiest way to deal with this might be for if you have been reading about what's happening in the greater community, and some of the informations that I've provided here, that maybe it'd be better if you guys know what I'd like to see happen. But I'm sure you must have questions, concerns, etc. So let's just go there.
You include, if I may, you included in there that Minneapolis has already.
Minneapolis, Red Wing. There's 2 other communities thinking about it. It's happening all over the country, so we're not the first to do this. But I just feel that it would be, particularly in light of our history, which many of us are rediscovering thanks to Mary's successful program this summer. We're understanding the realities of what has happened in the nation, and I just see this as a way for Brainerd to somewhat declare itself more progressive in how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive how we got to where we are now. It just seems that it would be something that would be a really a good
gesture,
yeah,
in a way,
public relations,
Here.
if you will, statement to make that.
Because if I made the ceremony that we had out here, in thanks to Mary, as you say, of bringing the tribes together and stuff like that, and the proclamations, and to me that, it really, it's been something that in a sense has been festering for years and years and years, because it was always, we kind of weren't the nice people always, and yet that really brought the Native Americans, into, I think, they saw us in a much better light than what they'd ever seen, this community do. So,
well, I think it's you're right on, but I think it's particularly interesting that this community has been at least twice, to some degree, rescued from a worse fate than we could have, because of 2 of our Indian neighborhoods assisted us in the past. And this just seemed like, with Columbus Day coming on, Brainerd has a lot of, a fair degree of negative things that we're dealing with, like budgets and crumbling water towers and everything that you can think of. This would be something positive that we could do that wouldn't cost us 1 penny.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I just kind of want to say that.
Second?
Okay,
Was
so
there a
discussion?
No, I'm just.
For discussion.
I like the idea, but I would like to say from a pedagogical viewpoint, I would rather see us add that in addition to. I don't celebrate Columbus Day, but I commemorate Columbus Day. I think by keeping that there, it fosters discussion, and it makes people look at what happens. I mean, you can't underestimate the import of the first European from the mainland sailing to the Americas. I mean, that generated the massive die-up because of smallpox and instituted slavery amongst the American Indians from Europeans, that sort of thing. I think by just changing it to Indigenous Peoples Day and getting rid of the Columbus Day, I see as a teacher, it kind of takes a little bit of, it closes off the discussion or makes it a little easier to ignore some of that discussion. Also, when you're kind of looking at that, one of the articles talked about the union contracts having Columbus Day off. So if we change it to Indigenous, Peoples Day, do we now have to change our union contracts?
No,
or
at least you have to work on that day now.
Yeah, y'all have to work. So, I think it's a great idea to look at that, but I would be in favor of having both of those on that day, like adding that to the calendar, not taking Columbus Day off of the calendar.
If you read the Minneapolis
They
one,
did that
They
too.
did that, and that makes a lot of sense. And I know that the county used to have Columbus Day off, and they don't. They work, and I think it's only the feds that are there close for Columbus Day. But Mary.
Well, first of all, I'm going to say that this is altogether different than what we did in the summer, the History Committee did. That was the Day of Reconciliation, and that was altogether a different situation. The two Native Americans, as I assume all of you know, had been hanged without due process. That is certainly against the Constitution of the United States. And so that was really what the reconciliation was about. It was recognized that we as Americans had allowed our own Constitution to be violated, and therefore reaching out to reconcile with those people who had been denied due process. That's what our ceremony was about. I cannot support this because we cannot erase our own history. The whole idea of history is that you look at it, good and bad, warts and all, and you learn from it. Hopefully you build on the good things and you try to not repeat the things that you wish had never happened. But nonetheless, it is part of our history. And going along with what Dave said, as well as the downside, what you speak of Columbus, look at the upside. Probably many of us would not be here, or this nation be the greatest that the world has ever known, without someone, and in this case it was Columbus, landing here. I think it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction. And as much as I want to continue the reconciliation and dialogue with our Native Americans, and we are planning another History Week, and we are planning a day of community with them again, some event that will involve them. And I want to see that continue. But I think we'll offend a whole other group of people if we do this. And my goal would be that we do things that bring people together, not put this one up and that one down, but try to truly address the equality that I believe in and that I believe most Americans believe in. Not this one up, that one down, this one kicked, this one deified. If there were a motion that we as a council identify and adopt another day as Native American Day, I would be so happy. Another day. Leave Columbus Day. It's part of our history. Leave it. Those who enjoy it can enjoy it, and those who don't. I presume there are other holidays like that. Some think they're great, some think they aren't. I would certainly leave Columbus Day alone as is. I would happily support identifying another day as Native American Day, and perhaps then working for some ceremony annually to recognize it. That's the way I feel about it, and this is very difficult because it shouldn't be looked at as, well, you're against the Native Americans. I'm not. My heart and soul is with them. But I think this is the knee-jerk reaction that will only offend another group of people who probably are afraid to say anything. And so that's what I have to say. I won't support this motion. I would happily support identifying a Native American.
I agree with a lot of what Mary said, but I think it would have more import if we were to have the 2 days at the same time. So I mean, I would support this. I would support an amendment that says instead of change it to, add Native American Day to.
I'll make that part of my motion, being your second.
So excuse me, sir, Mr. Chair, but does the motion now read that we will call this Columbus Day / Native American Day. Is that what it will be? Is that your motion?
Yep.
Well, I think that's great.
Yep.
I can support that one.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, the only other thing I was thinking of, and this is, as Mary was talking about reconciliation, and they're going to have something next year.
Absolutely.
Maybe at that point, maybe you could have some kind of recognition day in that reconciliation ceremony that we had, but also have it in a positive manner of having that day set aside for Native American Day as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. We want it to be meaningful, because what we did this summer, we looked at as just a beginning, and that we want to continue the dialogue and the expansion of joining our cultures and being one people. We're one people in this country, and so I don't want to do anything that divides us further. And I think to throw out Columbus Day totally would do that. So I think this motion is a good one.
Just one quick thing, and I hate to be nitpicky, but I actually looked this up. The Native American is still a controversial term. It was developed in the 1960s. It's still not 100% accepted Native or in the Indian culture, because there's so many different forms of Indian tribes. First Peoples was the actual term, and I see that Minneapolis incorporated that because it includes First Nation, Inuit, Aboriginal, Indian. It includes all. Yes, it includes all types. So if we were to change it, I guess I would like to at least throw that out there. That seems to be a more accepted term than Native Americans.
Indigenous or First Peoples?
First Peoples.
No,
That's the
not
Canadian term.
indigenous.
Yes.
If I can add to that, when we were going through our work on our reconciliation, we met with several of the tribal leaders, and they have changed what is their accepted term. It's been changed several times. And I'm not certain that Native American, frankly, is the right one. Now, it isn't First People. Is it American Indian? We went through that with them. Maybe we could say this is our concept, but once again, check what is the appropriate term.
Mm-hmm.
Do you follow what I'm saying? I think we can find that out easily.
The other thing, too, is if you did something like Indigenous Peoples, then you are looking at not just the natives of the United States. You can also celebrate the Aborigines. You can celebrate.
But even that term then related to those native to India, which isn't. So that's
Indigenous?
Yes. So that's why that wasn't. Believe me, I spent too much time reading. It was interesting to me. I understand, but I don't
We
want
have
to
two
waste.
teachers
I don't want to
down
spend
there.
any more time on it. I think
Are we
it's
talking about
important.
the Aryans as opposed to the Hindus?
I think it's important, and I appreciate.
Are you sure you're not safety and public works in disguise?
The motion, I have changed it. I amended it not to change Columbus Day, but to add
Okay, and
add
seconded
Native
that?
Peoples Day.
No, Dave.
Yeah, Native
But
American.
let's use whatever the proper term. We can find that out.
Is everyone okay with that?
With what?
Adding, we don't know.
The name to be
Chosen by the city administrator, or what?
Yes.
From what
the attorney.
authority?
Check with Pastor Stiles of the First Lutheran Church. He gave us a lot of help because his office manager is Native American, whatever the proper term is. And so if you would check with Pastor Stiles, First Lutheran Church, I think he can put the appropriate. Do you want me to check with
No,
him?
I can check. I'm just saying, is that what the whole council? I mean,
Oh.
is that what the
Oh,
council?
I don't know. Whatever they
We
want.
need a vote.
We could bring this to Monday's meeting.
Oh, all right. And then have the right stuff.
I don't think that's going to help. Will you have the correct term by Monday?
The
I think
Yeah.
Are you looking at me?
Yes.
The thing is there isn't a correct term. And really, I was hoping that the discussion would be, I knew there would be good discussion tonight. I certainly didn't expect this group to just go with the program here. But I can't be, just personally, I can't be supportive of a diluted effort to make a statement just because of some of the reasoning that I've heard tonight. If you want more information regarding wording, specific wording of this, there are more authoritative people to consult than the local Lutheran minister. No disparaging there.
Okay.
But the point is, if we're going to dilute it, then personally, I don't see why we should bother with it.
And by diluted, you mean
By
celebrate
combining,
both?
the point of this is making a statement of whom we as a group see ourselves and how we got to where we are now, the history that we've gone through. And if we have a Native American, or whatever you want to call it, / Columbus Day, what's the point?
I would say, I see what you're saying, but I see the point as fostering discussion. I mean, because why would you have them both there? Because
But
this is
wouldn't
where
you-
we were, this is where we're going. And that's kind of how I see that. And again, I don't see celebrating Columbus Day and commemorating. I mean, we commemorate 9/11. It's there. I mean, and I kind of look at it in some aspects. There are a lot of things that are very similar to those kind of acts. Okay. Again, I think anybody. I mean, was Columbus an extremely ambitious person that did? He did some bad things, but he also was extremely brave and you have to look at him as a person, and again, you need to look at the warts, and you can say, look, this led to these awful, awful, horrible things. And we were involved in that, and we benefited from that. Where can we go now? That's what the situation is. And that's kind of how I see making it like an Indigenous Peoples Day combined with Columbus Day.
Well, this is a step in the right direction.
My question is, sounds like we still have more discussion. Is it something we want to table?
Yes, I think we should, personally.
I mean, else makes that a motion, but now I got a motion on the floor. I can't make a lot of them.
I can't make a motion.
Does anybody want to make a motion to?
You already have a motion and a second on the floor.
Well, you
that's
can
right.
make a motion to table it.
That's if you're going to table in general.
And I would make that motion.
Okay. We need a second on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought so.
Okay.
The mayor is going to second it. He wants to get
Is there a second to table
I'll
it?
second the motion.
Okay, Mary seconded.
And no discussion.
No discussion. And so we'll bring it forward on the first meeting, or no, the 15th. We'll bring it back on the 15th, not next week.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with that?
I can't discuss.
All right.
You have to vote on it.
Yeah.
Huh?
We do
You
have
do
to
have to
vote
vote
on
on
it.
that, though.
The table
We have to vote on the
On-
table.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same
No.
sign.
Yes.
Aye.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Skip and,
I
Okay.
voted against.
Public forum. It's 9:46. Public forum is time allocated for citizens to bring matters not on the agenda to the attention of the council. Time limits may be imposed. Anybody here for public forum? Anybody here for public forum? Nobody's here for public forum. So
Because you
we'll close-
scared them off with your new.
Yeah.
So we'll close the public hearing at 9:47. Okay, Mayor, report.
thank you, Mr. President. It's one of the things in my report was on August 27th, I attended the ceremony of the signing of the agreement between Camp Ripley and the Minnesota Power for Solar Power Initiative. And I think there was a good article in the paper, but I think that there's people that don't get the Brainerd paper, I found out. And so there might be people in the listening audience not realizing that this agreement between Camp Ripley, and it was signed by General Nash, as well as the head of the Minnesota Power, and there was a large contingency of people from Minnesota Power there, as well as elected officials. Our Representative Ward was there, Congressman Nolan, Al Franken was there. They all spoke. That what this does is it provides 100 acres, which is hard to fathom, but they had a map, so you could see that 100 acres of solar panels, and this is a mandate by our government to go to other alternative means of energies, that it also will provide electricity and that for Camp Ripley, and because it is a federal installation, or at least state and federal installation for training and that, if there should be a power outage or whatever, would continue to be able to provide power for Camp Ripley. And it's going to be interesting to see. They had a map, and they also allowed, if you wanted to go up in a helicopter to see the area of 100 acres of where the solar panels will be installed. I think it's around a $25 million project. Don't count me on that, but it is the largest one in any installation as far as military installation, and I don't think there are too many other places that have this size of solar panels being installed. So that was really just a neat presentation, and Camp Ripley is always on the cutting edge of moving ahead and doing things, for the betterment of our country, as well as not only in training, but also all of the other things that they provide, as far as like training for the Minnesota Highway Patrol and stuff like that. So I'm still a part of that advisory board, as well as Mary is, and so it was a neat celebration that day. The weather was fantastic. So, and we have something in our city that is on a different vein, but I understand that our park director, Mr. Tony Saylor, is going to be leaving the country, and I think he is planning on coming back. But he is leaving on the 9th for France, and in doing so, celebrating commemoration of the 70th anniversary of the sacrifice of Major Don M. Bierbauer, and he's from Hill City, but I found out he was actually born in Canada, but moved to Hill City when he was a couple of years old with his family. Mr. Saylor's going over there, he thought it might be nice if I could part with one of my quartz water towers, and I am more than honored to do that. And I'm going to read to you what I am going to have inscribed on a plaque that the water tower will be sitting on. And this quartz replica water tower is presented to the Honorable Mayor Anton Lemar and the town of St. Thierry in recognition and appreciation for your observance and commemoration of the 70th anniversary of the sacrifice of Major Don M. Bierbauer from Hill City, Minnesota, USA. Sincerely, Mayor James E. Walleen, Brainerd, Minnesota, USA, dated 9 September 2014. And this is the date that they are going to have this commemoration at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And in reading, and I hope most people read the article in the paper, but this is big. I mean, this is really big, and all of it kind of boils down to Tony's brother writing a book, and then the people from this town read parts of it, and I'm going to let Tony take the rest of it on his report, but I'm also sending along, I think, I don't know how many, probably 60 city pins. He has 29 students in, I think, a grade school over there. So I did pick up more pins today and send those along with him, as well as the dignitaries and all of the people over there. And one of the things that I found interesting in reading was that when this major was crash landed, one of the people that came to and tried to help or whatever, I think he was a Lemaire as well. And I read that in the thing that you gave me. Anyway, so with that, I am getting this plaque together. I'll have it ready for him by tomorrow, as well as the pins. And was there something else I was supposed to get for you?
I think that was it.
Is that going to take care of it?
But I certainly appreciate you offering this replica of the water tower for this ceremony, and there are going to be representatives there from the American, British, and French Air Force and Army, and so they're making a really big thing out of it. They're going to be putting a plaque up on a 12th century church to commemorate Major Bierbauer's sacrifice. And you did mention the current mayor. It was his grandfather who was first at the crash site.
That's what it's the same name, and just, it was
yeah.
his grandfather.
And I should say too that Mr. Borkagan here, he was you designed my brother's book, and the book was also printed at Bang Printing. So,
Co-published.
And it is The Oranges Are Sweet, by the way, if anybody's want to buy it.
Great read.
But the tie-in is that my father grew up with Major Bierbauer, who was a few years younger than my dad. And my brother then researched that this guy did become the top ace in the 9th Air Force during World War II before his death.
Okay. I did okay then?
How are you going to keep them down on the farm once they've seen Gay Perry?
I've been to Gay Perry, and you know what? Most of the people there are not as friendly as the Minnesotans. That's all I got to say.
Oh, yeah, sure, you betcha.
You got that one right. Anyway, with that, I think it's truly exciting to have our park director be able to spend time with his brother, and I think you got another brother. There's several.
Another brother and a sister. Yeah, are going.
Going for this, and to me, it's fabulous that they are going to have this recognition, on the 9th of September. So, with that, a very positive end of report.
City attorney,
I have nothing to report tonight.
city administrator,
Nothing to report.
city engineer.
Oh, I'll keep that going. I have nothing to report this evening.
Can I
planner?
ask real quick, how's Garfield going? The Garfield project is because I seen
With
you
all the
out
rain?
there this morning.
Yeah, it's, of course, we had a lot of rain again yesterday, which was not very fortunate. But 10th Avenue held up well this morning. All of the buses were able to get in and drop off the kids without a problem. They weren't sinking in 10th Avenue at all. The road was solid. It was damp. It was wet. We had some flooding last night at the intersections, and so quite a bit of water sitting around in the intersections, but that dried up as the day went on. From what I observed this morning, parents walking their kids to the school who had to park a block or so away. I think we're just seem to be happy that school was started, and I really didn't hear an awful lot of grumbling, or any grumbling for that matter, about the road conditions. So I thought everything went pretty smooth. Contractor made some progress today with getting some Class 5 on 11th Avenue, or starting that process. So we'll keep, as weather permits, we're going to just keep chipping away at it, and hopefully things will just dry out for a little bit here so we can get things wrapped up quickly.
And I want to thank the engineer, to see him out there personally, directing traffic and working with the crews out there at 7:30 in the morning. I was stunned and said, great, at least our engineers out here seeing it firsthand. Appreciate you doing that.
City planner.
I have a few items that I could report on tonight. First of all, Today I had a conversation with Jeff Bean, the associate of Mike Higgins for the Brainerd Industrial Center. We were talking about the approval process for the interim use permit that they need for decommissioning at the facility, and I explained the normal process for the hearing process and the review process, explaining that the Planning Commission next could hear it at its October 8th meeting, and the City Council could get a recommendation on October 20th. Mr. Bean has asked if it would be possible to have special meetings to facilitate a quicker process for the review. I talked to the chairman of the Planning Commission today, and she is willing to have a special meeting. If we can get quorum for the Planning Commission, the soonest we'd be able to have a special meeting, I think, was around the 17th or so of September. And then, of course, a recommendation would come to the City Council. So the next step in that is, would the City Council be willing to have a special meeting to consider the request of the Brainerd Industrial Center interim use permit sometime toward the end of September?
What if it didn't pass the E&Z meeting?
Well, it would come as a recommendation, either approval or denial.
Okay.
Yeah. Your first meeting in October is October what? 6th. So it's either toward the end of September or the first meeting in October, whatever you want to do. But
we can adjourn to it in our next meeting.
You could, yes.
Yeah, we might be having another budget meeting
Sure.
anyway,
Yeah.
probably at the end of it.
For discussion purposes.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'll pass that along. Let's see. The city newsletter is on. I want to make sure that the public knows, and we've been mentioning it before. I'll mention again, the city's newsletter is on the city's website. We're beginning to put together the next quarter's edition of the newsletter, and it'll be a great place to talk about you can't rake leaves into the city street, because it'll come out in October. Let's see here. Last meeting, we had a rezoning issue with the Jedlinski property on 8th Street. I want to let you know that they did submit some information to verify that the third unit in that apartment building was occupied by a member of the family. It was information sufficient enough to believe that it was occupied by a family member. So we went ahead and authorized the issuing of the third license at that property. So that closes the book on that for now, I suppose.
Thank you for working with him.
Absolutely. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that earlier tonight you were talking about grants and grant writing. I just wanted to let the council, or remind the council, that the planning department, with cooperation from other departments, has been responsible for about $1.5 million worth of grants in the last couple of years for city projects, so we do have the ability to write them in-house. In addition to that, we've received grants from Essentia Health, Initiative Foundation, NJPA, and the Historical Society, all grants written in-house. So we do have that ability. The issue is time. That is probably the more bigger issue. So with that, end of my report.
Did you close the book on Kinder yet?
No.
Oh, okay.
I talked to the building official today. It's still open. It's not been completed. It's so close. I mean, we could talk to Mr. Molly about it, because it's, they're in the criminal prosecution position now. It's going to, if we do pursue it criminally, there's going to be an awful lot of paperwork and time expended to do that, and we're so close to getting it done that...
You're making a judgment call, and we'll go with it.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll be buttoned up before snow flies.
If I can, Mr. Chairman, we have one additional issue with Mr. Kinder. He has a sump pump that is down in an excavated area by his basement that is discharging into the street. He ran a hose out there, actually saw cut a gap in the back of the curb section and is running water into the street. Obviously, he can't do that. Our ordinance doesn't allow that. He actually did that earlier in the summer. We sent him a letter a month ago, told him September 1st is the deadline, get it disconnected. You can discharge it on your lawn, but you cannot discharge it in the street. Today, it's still discharged on the street, so we did send him a $100 citation, told him he's got 10 days to get it corrected or he gets another citation.
Saga never ends.
Okay, Fire Chief.
Good evening, folks. I have nothing to report tonight. Thank you.
Mr.
I know that surprises you.
Mr. French, going Park Director.
Thank you, nothing to report, and bonjour.
We had a discussion, the mayor and I, if the writing should be in French or in English. It's going over to France, so it's going to be written in English. I hope they can read it.
Oh,
They have CNN there.
And I have nothing to report. Any other committee reports? Okay. With no other committee reports, we're going to adjourn to the budget meeting on Monday, the 8th at 6 o'clock, and also the Safety and Public Works workshop at 4 o'clock, 4 to 6 on September 11th.
So moved.